Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to Ask Me Anything, sponsored by the School of Information and Library Science at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. My name is Brian Sturm, and I'll be the MC for today's event. We have one panelist today, Dr. Gary Marchionini, our dean. But before we go into our conversation, I'd like to say thank you all for joining us as viewers today. If you have questions that you would like to push through for Gary, then please use the description box in the YouTube channel to submit those, and I will do my best to bring them into the conversation. So we're going to pause here just briefly, and I'll be right back. Hello, Gary. Welcome. How are you today?
I'm fantastic. Thanks, Brian. It's a pleasure to be here on this beautiful day in Chapel Hill. It's just totally exciting to see the students all over campus, and especially here in Manning Hall. It's buzzing with activity. It's been a long time, and it's wonderful to see all the smiles and the energy again.
It really is. It's a delight having the students back in the building and getting rid of some of that isolation feeling. But Zoom has its places, of course, as we're using it now, and the online communication. But it's certainly nice to be back in person. Gary, you wear a lot of hats at this school and have over the course of your time here. Can you, at the moment, just tell us a little bit about yourself and as a way of introduction?
Oh, do I have to say I was born when I was very young?
No.
No. Okay,
but you just did. So.
I've been at SILS for since 1998. I came as a faculty member that summer, and my research sits at the intersection of information retrieval and human-computer interaction. Basically, how do we make information more accessible to people? And before becoming dean in 2010, I had a pretty active research lab with a lot of doctoral students and faculty colleagues, and really had a lot of fun investigating information-seeking behavior, information retrieval techniques, video retrieval, and then in 2010 became dean. And although my research and teaching productivity went down pretty dramatically, actually leading such a great school has been an honor and a privilege. And I think any success that we've had over those last 12 and a half, 13 years have really been due to great staff, great students, and great faculty. I'm just really honored to continue to be at the helm of such a great school.
Yeah. So you started on this sort of professorial track, as most of us do when we get our PhDs, but not always. And the lure of the sort of the professional work can be pretty strong, especially for people in the information professions. So what brought you to wanting to sort of foreground academia and professorial work?
Well, I've been a teacher my entire adult life. I started out teaching in the public schools at the junior high and then high school level. I was primarily a math teacher, so I was committed to public education. I loved it. I enjoyed teaching, and was doing graduate studies at Wayne State in Detroit while I was teaching in the area, and just continued to get more credits and more degrees, and eventually decided to enter the PhD program to really study sort of learning and learning that was being affected by technologies of that day, which were calculators and then the early computers, and that really drove me as why did why did students want to leave my classroom, which was so interesting, to learn about this math stuff, and go and sit in a basically a closet with a clickety clackety old teletype and do like boring drill and practice programs on a teletype. And I was like, there's something going on here. There's some sort of either motivational thing or individualistic thing. And so I aim to really begin to investigate that. And so that's what drove me to the research sort of area of the academy. And then I joined the faculty at Wayne State, and then eventually after the PhD, moved on to the University of Maryland, where I think, honed my research skills, looking at it from more of a human-computer interaction perspective.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So if let's stick with that for a minute. This is sort of this idea of search as learning, and the nature of search. I mean, you've been in the business for a while now, and can you talk to us about the changes that you see in search capabilities, in perhaps even student capabilities, and what they come into their degree progress already knowing, because they're getting it at a very, very young age on their phones or wherever. What kind of changes have you seen across your career as in this area of search either as search or as search as learning?
How many hours do you have?
About 10 minutes, Gary.
Yeah, right. Okay. So, well, and the search was always difficult. It used to be that, if you were a child who was interested in giraffes, you could ask people, which was kind of the most common information-seeking behavior, right? You ask mom and dad, you ask a teacher, and you start to sort of learn that way. You might go to an encyclopedia, a print encyclopedia, and I would love to say that young kids knew about indexes, but they usually just looked under G and tried to spell out giraffe. And so if you think about how difficult it used to be to actually learn by searching, you had to go to the library, you had to go to resources, and it took time and it took effort, and it took some kind of skill. And the tools were somewhat powerful, but they were kind of primitive compared to what we have today. So when we started to sort of digitize encyclopedias, dictionaries, reference materials, those were the first things to become digital. And then the actual basic primary content started to be digitized. It just totally changed the capability of people to find things to the point now where it's not so much finding anymore; it's filtering, it's evaluating, and so we've really changed the nature of the thought processes that have to take place for us to find information. And so the changes have been dramatic, and they've been driven by advances in not just computers, but in our ability to actually create search systems and search engines that respond to queries in very, very sophisticated ways that take advantage not only of all of the words that have ever been digitized, but things like location, like events that are taking place, temporal issues, what's popular, what's trending. And so our ability to put our fingers on at least raw, potentially useful information is just totally different than it used to be. And so what that causes today is for the search as learning to be expanded pretty dramatically to evaluation, assessment of meaning, and interpretation, rather than just getting the data. I mean, getting the data or the basic tokens of what we think of as meaning. That problem in many ways has been solved by the Googles of the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there was fear in society when print came along that it would be the death of memory, right?
Socrates died for random access, someone once said.
So, I mean, I think there is, in some spheres, there is a similar concern now, right? That as we rely more and more on these technologies to do very, very fast information seeking and recall, and as we switch from sort of the need to remember to the need to, or the ability to rely on technology to remember for us. And this is not a new issue, but it's maybe a more pressing issue now with the extent of digital memory. Do you see any downsides of this this incredibly complex ability to search, or is this transition from the sort of information seeker to the information filterer evaluator actually a good thing for us?
Well, I think overall, it's there's always trade-offs, of course, with any technologies, and of course there are some downsides. But I think the upsides are far outweigh the downsides. I mean, I go back to my early days when we were having the debates about should we allow kids to use calculators in math classrooms, and I certainly wanted my children to learn the multiplication table. Now, what I didn't want was them to spend all their time, doing a million multiplication tables and long division things when they could more quickly use a calculator once they understood the principles. Right? Mm-hmm. And so there's a tension between understanding the underlying principles of a particular operation and just doing the operation rotely. And the machines are really good at doing rote things. And so what we do want is to understand what the rote requirement is and then turn it over. Right? But it's that understanding what the rote requirement is first to know that in the case, again, going back to arithmetic, that multiplication is just repeated addition and that division is really repeated subtraction. And if you kind of know that, then, turn it over to the calculator and get on with it, right? Solve real problems, balance your checkbook, live your life. And I think the same thing is true today with any kind of information seeking. What we've seen in library reference desks, for example, is that people come prepared very often by having done a bunch of Google searches. And so the questions that they're able to articulate and ask are much more sophisticated and in depth. And so the job of the reference librarian or is really much more in depth in the length of time it takes to actually really help people and become, a partner in an understanding process is more engaging and I think more exciting than it perhaps was 30 years ago, just kind of answering kind of fact retrieval type questions.
Mm-hmm. That also reminds me of one of the sort of conversations we've had here many times over the years with our students about the division between sort of theoretical approaches and practice. Mm-hmm. And I know here at SILS, we sort of pride ourselves on the fact that we try and do both. I think our students often feel that we are maybe a little theory heavy, but what you're saying there in the sense of making sure that we know the underlying principles and then turning things over to the computers to do the sort of rote calculations or the number crunching or that kind of thing. Is that, in your mind, is sort of the theoretical frameworks of library information science? Could that sort of metaphorically or equate with this idea of underlying principles that you just mentioned?
Sure, and I think that's exactly right. You have to know kind of why you're doing something, which goes to motivation and goes to application, typically, and then you have to sort of understand how you map the actual how onto the why. And so I think that's what we try to do as academics is either ground the techniques that we are helping our students learn in what either real applications or a theoretical perspective. But it's the theoretical perspective has to do with valuing that distinction between how and why and bringing them together. So yes, we're a discipline, a field that has a theory, and we expect our students to understand those theories because the techniques tend to change, especially with respect to technology. There's always going to be another programming language that's kind of better or more easier to use than the ones we used 10 years ago. A different app or application that is superior to ones we've had before. But the why we use that app, the kinds of the ways we use it, and the when and the how and the why. Those are the kinds of things that we really want people to focus on, because then they'll become thriving professionals, intelligent citizens, and active adults in a society, rather than kind of cogs in a wheel to just execute tasks.
Mm-hmm. And so one of the primary strengths in that sense of graduates of SILS is going to be this sense of adaptability, flexibility, being able to take information from one context and apply it to another. I'm trying to see that sense, because the technology's changed so quickly that keeping up with this program or that program or the details of that is something that really is going to fall primarily, I think, on the students to keep up with that. If we can get the underlying principles behind it and the theory behind it, then hopefully that will give them the adaptability and the flexibility to adjust as the markets change and the particular apps change.
Right. So at sort of the highest level, a principle or theory is, I am a lifelong learner, and I have accepted that and embraced it, and I want to. And I know how to address that as a challenge. And so, most high school kids are probably making those kinds of decisions, if not consciously, as they make their decisions about what to do after high school. And by the time they get to SILS, they probably already are pretty much comfortable with, yes, I'm going to be a lifelong learner. I'm always going to be learning. Things are always going to be changing. So how do I become a more active learner? And I think understanding that there are a wide array of not just sources of information, but strategies and techniques for learning. I mean, some of it is really learning by finding things that other people have already explained. Looking it up, or finding the do-it-yourself video, or talking to an expert. But more importantly, for professionals, a lot of it is learning where you can't just go look it up because it's a new problem. It's something that we haven't faced before, and so it's a problem solving rather than a solving problem kind of activity. Mm-hmm. And what we want is our graduates, to be active problem solvers. Not that just knowing where to look stuff up is only the beginning of the problem. It's got to go deeper than that. In terms of, what does that mean? How do I extend that? How do I apply it? Does it apply in this situation? Those are the kinds of things that information professionals are really good at. And that's why, they get good jobs and are in demand, not just in our traditional sort of settings like libraries and archives, but throughout our entire business and industry and government enterprise.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. Can we do a little switch here and ask you to switch from your scholar hat to your dean hat?
Sure. And
there you go.
I'll put the pointy one on.
Okay, that's right. The sorting hat, right? Can can you give us a sense of the current state of the school and sort of what you look forward to in the next 2 to 5 years for the school itself?
Absolutely. In fact, it's very timely. Susan Sylvester and Samantha Delaria and others have really worked on the state of the school, which we've just prepared for the fall. And the school is in, I think, pretty good shape. We've come through a rough time, like everyone, vis-a-vis the pandemic. But we're kind of back in action. We have record enrollments in our programs this fall, which is terrific. We are living through kind of a bit of a crisis in terms of staffing and faculty, and we're trying to hire and replace people who are moving on to other positions. So there's challenges. However, we're hitting it out of the park on research grants, on the way that our faculty are producing really innovative and timely research and ideas and leading the conversations about critical issues, not only in the information retrieval or human-computer interaction or library space, but in the whole notion of, how do we continue to save our democracy, to promote our democracy? How do we actually make the world a better place? How do we, deal with issues like global warming? How do we, really address the fundamental problems of our time? So I'm incredibly optimistic. We have a pretty vibrant campus. We have we're a hub and a partner with almost every unit on campus. We have joint appointments. Our students are double majors or have interesting minors. We're a bridge across different fields, across different departments and units, because we're information professionals and everyone's got information problems. So we're in the middle of things, and I think it's a very exciting space. I'm incredibly optimistic about the immediate years ahead. We're going to continue to attract great students. We're working on trying to broaden our diversity and inclusion for not just students but faculty and staff, so that we're kind of a leader in illustrating what higher education can be in a very sort of challenging time. So I'm very optimistic. Our finances are stable at this point. Enrollments are great. Our grant and research productivity is really, really astounding, and we're well regarded in our professional societies. So I can't think of a better place I'd want to be than SILS.
Yep. I agree with it. Being here too. So as you transitioned, sort of thinking back over your time as dean, when you transitioned from being primarily an active faculty member and a scholar to this sort of more administrative role, looking back on it, are there sort of big lessons that you've learned, or were there, what were some of the major challenges that you faced in doing that shift?
Well, I think for anyone who wants to be a leader, you really have to find a way to balance the sort of ego of having sort of optimized all of your efforts toward your own lab or your own research agenda or your own group to a broader community. And so what I guess the lesson that I'm still learning is how to sort of help make everyone else look good, right? I mean, that's not the way, we typically work in the academy. It's very competitive. We're always trying to, get out there, get our paper published first, have the idea first, win the grant, do those sorts of things, place our students in the best places. And so as a dean or a leader, you really have to try and balance that sort of individual notion of success, and to broaden it out to everyone. And that's hard because we all have different interests and different expertises. So that's probably the biggest lesson, is to sort of subjugate your own personal research agenda, teaching ideas and so on, to the broader sort of community. We've come through a lot. We've grown an undergraduate program from a pretty modest group to a very vibrant, large program now. We've transformed the school into a research powerhouse, where more than half of our expenditures are grant and contract related. We have really, I think, sort of changed the school, along with what's going on with information schools all around the world, to be a pretty interesting and well regarded discipline. And I think that will continue. That when people were writing about the information society in the 50s and 60s and 70s, we're there. And so, we really are an information society, and I think more and more people recognize that libraries and museums and archives have always been, really incredibly valuable to not just the protection and preservation of the world's knowledge, but in its production and in its distribution and sharing. And so, for us to be able to sort of make it more knowledge more accessible, more equitably accessible, is a grand challenge and a grand vision. So I can't think of something that would be more exciting to help lead. Is a great school trying to do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. I've got a challenge for you now.
Okay.
There was a question that was submitted. That says, how would you define UX, user experience, in one sentence?
One sentence. Effective and fun. Effective and fun. Success. Those would be the words that would be in the sentence, right? So, the effective is it's got to work, right? The fun is it needs to be, what we used to call user friendly, or something that is, not so horrible that you never want to do it again. And then it needs to actually not just work, but then be applicable. So it has to do with an experience that is engaging and successful.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well done. You passed the challenge. So we're running a little short on time, so I want to finish with one question, if I may. And that is sort of looking forward to the future again. There's so many, as you say, we're an information society. We're increasingly data-driven, and so data science is now, sort of the buzzword of the country, or one of them, I guess. But the information field has many opportunities, probably too many opportunities. Do you see any particular direction as really compelling for the LIS field, or even for SILS as a part of the LIS field?
Well, the opportunities are limitless. I have my own personal sorts of interests, and so it's biased by that. I do think what's going on with generative text and imagery is incredibly important and interesting for the arts and the humanities, especially. I think that CRISPR technology are information dependent. I'd like to see, our libraries and our students, learning more about not just the technologies, but the techniques that are, entire new industries are being built around. And then I also think that, we can never ignore sort of a fundamental problem that I think is only now getting more recognition, and that's sort of the whole issues of peace and social justice. We've made these amazing progresses. If you read Science or Nature, I mean, incredible things that we're doing scientifically. But we live in a world in which a single individual in a seat of power can kind of destroy the world. And there's just something fundamentally, as important about that as there is about global warming, as there is about personal health and prosperity.
Yeah, that's great. A bright vision for the future, lots of opportunities, and a dynamic school and faculty. That's a pretty good world to live in.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you, Gary, for joining us for this. And that concludes our Ask Me Anything for today. I want to thank the viewers for joining us and our production crew behind the scenes as well. And we hope that you will stay healthy and happy and join us again for future Ask Me Anythings.